All right. Welcome everyone holding by this Q&A. Yeah, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. A few things came up. And again, as we always say, good things bear repeating. Someone asked by a Noahide, by a non-Jew, or potentially even a Jew in training, if a person works in a secular workplace, right? You work and you end up working with all kinds of people, Muslims, Christians, atheists, anyone in between. Is a personal life, right? So what would be the simple answer? Simple answer is, unless a person's working for let's say, a Jewish company, an Orthodox Jewish company, then most likely there'll be non-Jews there. Could be anybody, right? You could have Muslims, Christians, Hindus, atheists, transgenders. I mean, we'll keep this clean, right? We'll keep this clean over here. So the question is, what's the person supposed to do? Is it a sin to work for such a place? Right? So we say it's obviously better. A person works around Jews, Orthodox Jews, no question. But a person lives in the middle of nowhere, right? They live in Idaho somewhere or wherever. There aren't so many Jews around. And it's a whole mixture. It's a whole hodgepodge, right, of people. So the look is the person's allowed to work there. So the question really stems from the facts, about doing business. This does come up. Not exactly, but whatever, similar. And that is that during the holidays, the halacha is that a person shouldn't do business. A Jew should not do business with a non-Jew day before his holiday, whatever holiday it is. What are we worried about? We're worried about the fact he's making money and he made a sale. So he's going to thank, his idol. He's going to thank his pagan god or wherever. Right? So the halacha is to the day before, maybe the day after, a non-Jewish holiday, shouldn't do business with them. Shouldn't do business at all with them. Why? Because maybe, they're going to thank their God, for making money or whatever. So it comes on the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, one of the great Ashkenazi commentaries, early commentaries. And the Rosh there at the beginning of Tractate of Avodah Zarah, the Rosh over there says, we have no choice. Why do we have no choice? Because since we're dispersed amongst all the non-Jews, we live in non-Jewish areas. We're not living in ghettos per se. And we do business with non-Jews. So you have no choice. So he says, since we're interspersed, we're not just, working with Jews here. So then even if we say that by non-Jews, you got to do business before their holiday, they're all going to get excited, and they're going to kiss their idol, or they're going to thank their idol, thank their pagan gods. You should say it's forbidden, right? The mission says forbidden. Beginning of Tractate of Avodah Zarah. But if that's the case, we got a problem, says the Rosh. The Rosh says that we have to do business with non-Jews. We're dispersed. We're all over the world. We're everywhere. How can we not do business that day? So you say maybe regardless, maybe they will. Maybe they will kiss their idol in the process. Maybe. Maybe they'll be thankful. But we'd say in the vernacular, business is business. We don't care what a person's going to do. Right? We don't care. They're going to say, my God made this deal. He's helping me out over here. He's helping me make more money. Maybe that will happen. Potentially. Unless someone's like an absolute Bible thumper, I don't think most people are going to do that, even the day before the holiday or the day after. Right? But even so, why would it be forbidden for us, for a Jew to do business with a non-Jew day before? So you tell me, like the Mishnah says, he's going to thank his idol, should be forbidden. He might say he might thank his idol anyway. Like, what does that have to do with me? Because you're doing something direct over here. You're doing business. But the halacha is, as the Rush brings down, the halacha is it's permissible. Why is it permissible? We live amongst non-Jews anyway. We have no choice. And it's not like we're just relying on Jewish business. We're not living in a ghetto per se. So therefore, it'd be okay. Right? It's only for the sake of business. You need to do this business. It's okay. Now, someone may ask, well, isn't it better not to do business on that day with them? On the day before? It could be. Could be, but if a person needs a certain thing, whatever it is, we're not going to limit. We're not going to say there are any limits over here. What if he does kiss his idol? Okay. Or he thanks his idol. He says, thank you very much. Have this customer, made me more money. Or maybe it's even a bigger deal. Who knows? Do I have to worry about that? So really the luck is you don't. Because we're not living in ghettos anymore. And we do business amongst non-Jews. So since we do business with non-Jews, they're probably the biggest customers. Right? So if that's the case, then it's okay. Regardless of what they do. Right? It should be okay. So now, throw back the question. Is it a sin for Noahides to work with Muslims, Christians, atheists, and other religions? Well, let me ask, unless you have an online business, so you don't see the people, you don't meet the people, most likely, who cares who buys your stuff? What does it matter? Right? It shouldn't make any difference. And someone buys the products. Even let's say the other way. Let's say they need something very badly. You're the one who, they're coming to you to buy it. So they may say, wow, I really need this. They're going to thank their God for having you in business, for having you, selling them this. So it goes both ways. You doing business with them or vice versa. Now the question would be, do I have to worry about that? If you don't meet the person, you don't see them, you don't speak to them, I can say it's worse. And I can say it's worse if you're working with people, you actually see them. Not just by Zoom or anything else. You see them, you work with them. Right? So, it's kind of tricky over here. Why, on the one hand, a person wants to be a team player. Person, doesn't want to be seen as a bad guy. On the other hand, hanging out with these people is bad. They don't have the same values. May even have negative values. Probably a lot of negative values. So he says, so what should you do? In many cases, you're not going to really have a choice. So, the main thing is that you have to be able to keep Shabbos, festivals, and all that. But all things being equal, a person's going to work with all kinds of different people. Now, by working with all kinds of different people, so you got to be careful. You got to be careful, having a close connection. Doesn't mean you just ignore them. Doesn't mean you just spit in their face. You got to have a connection. You're working together. You share information, clients, other things, whatever. right? Whatever it is. Problem is, sometimes things get too chummy. You know, you may have to go on certain work-related things that may make a person feel uncomfortable, but some things you may have no choice. Like I know of somebody that, for his business, around December 25th, they had this party, whatever. He had to go. He had no choice. Right? There is such a question, you're allowed to go to such a thing for what it represents. Even if it's not a religious thing, but, there's mixing, men, women, the whole mixture over here. Not to mention one time of year. So when this person goes, he's going under duress, but he's got no choice. Has to show his face there. So he goes, he mingles a little bit, and he goes in and out, stays as long as he has to stay, and then he leaves. And everybody knows he doesn't drink it. What's the only thing he has? Water, soda, that's it. Not going to eat anything, not going to drink anything, not going to have, too much to do with anybody, but got to make the rounds. Got to show your face. But anyway, it's not so simple. Because even if it's quote unquote a holiday party, no one's bowing down to crosses here. Most likely. So it's not really idolatry. On the other hand, you're getting together in a place where you shouldn't be. That's pretty clear. But you say, a person may say, well, it's for work. Well, not everything for work necessarily is permitted. But if there's a way out of it, good. If there's no way out of it, then everyone knows. Even if it's in a non-kosher place. There's non-kosher food there. Everyone knows you're not eating there. Everyone knows you're probably going to, sip some soda or whatever. And that's it. So in that sense, it's not as bad. But again, there are cases where a person may not have a choice. Now, if it's about getting off for Shabbos, not working on holidays, that has to be worked out. So I would say, if someone takes a job, they're going in this process, this is what they have to do. Now, if they're a Jew in training, technically, it's more than technically they're not Jewish yet. So if they're not Jewish, they don't have to take off for Shabbos. They don't have to take off for festivals. On the other hand, if they're in this process, that's what they have to say. It's what they have to do eventually. So I would say better to do it at the beginning than do it later. Much easier. But, I do know people have gone through discrimination because of it, which really, according to the law, certainly in the States, probably other places also, is illegal. You can't discriminate against religion. But someone going for a job opportunity, they have to tell them. They have to tell them straight out. I have to leave early on Friday. I don't work on Shabbos. I work on Saturday and, make amends. Want me to come in Sunday? Want me to come in Saturday night during the winter? Whatever. You make it up somehow. But, a Jew can't work on Shabbos. That's forbidden. So that has to be made known at the beginning. Now, let's say a person been working somewhere for a while, and now they're going through this process. Yeah, so they have to make it known at some point. It's easy if you already have the job. If a person's, looking for a job, it's a little bit different. Why do I say it's a little bit different? Because there could be a certain level of discrimination because you have to leave early on Friday, can't come in on Shabbos. They could discriminate. I know people that have been discriminated against. I said, welcome to Judaism. Welcome to being what it means to be a Jew. Now that's illegal. They're not allowed to. Really, they're not allowed to. It's against the law. Right? But you have to make known. that this is what this is what you're doing. So you can see, but someone will say, but it might be much harder to find a job. You're right. You know what? God can provide. God can provide. Right? It's the big boss. He's got a lot of ways at his disposal. Right? No question. But it could be more difficult. And even if it is, person wants to be a Jew, that's what you have to do. And if that means, all your sick days are taken out by Jewish holidays, so be it. Or vacation time, whatever. You have much less. So what I would say, what's more important, having more vacation days or sick days or God, right? We already know what the answer is. So that's it. It's a sacrifice. Obviously it's a worthwhile sacrifice. But people have to know this is what I have to do. And somebody told the story before. They told me a number of years ago, they had this thing, they had this meeting, and the meeting, lo and behold, was the first day of Sukkot. It's a festival, you can't work as a Jew. It's a good thing they weren't Jewish at the time, and they couldn't get out of it. They couldn't postpone it, whatever. They had to be there. And this person, was going bananas. They know what to do. I can't believe I made such an appointment, blah, blah, blah. So they asked me my advice. I was a little bit cruel over here. But I wanted them to get the point. So I said, Rabbi, what should I do? Can't get out of it. This, that, what's God going to think? I said, you know what God's going to think? He's going to think you should buy a Jewish calendar. So I said, go out and get a Jewish calendar. Because you can't make that mistake as a Jew. That may cost you your job. It might. But if in September and October, that's when the Jewish holidays come out, you better make sure that the day, what the dates are. So when the holidays are, when you can't work. So I was a little bit gruff, but I wanted them to get the message. You want to be a Jew? You're a Jew in training? You got to know the dates of the holidays. How can you not know that? I didn't realize I didn't buy a Jewish calendar. That's what you have to do. They don't like my answer, which I'm not surprised. They said, what's God going to think? I said, well, you're not Jewish yet, so it doesn't matter. So you got a free pass over here. But in the future, you have to know when Passover is. When the first days, the last days are. You have to know when Shavuos is. You have to know when the holidays are. What would have happened if they were Jewish? Now their job's on the line. They could say, listen, we need this thing. We need you to be there. This is the day. You have to be there. No one else can take your place. We can't postpone it. Can't go. Even if it would cost you your job. So a person would say, what, I could lose my job because of it? In theory, if you're not careful. I'm not saying it would happen. Parnasa, livelihood, is in the hands of God. It's not in our hands. We put our best foot forward, and either God will bless it or not, but that's no guarantee. So the Chofetz Chaim says in the laws of Lashon Hara, right? Person boss, their boss comes to them, and they say, who did this, that, and the other thing? And you know who it is. Now, in this case, let's just make it easy. You're not allowed to reveal the information. Right? It's Lashon Hara. Now, comes on the Chofetz Chaim and says, okay, what if the boss puts a lot of pressure on you? Or you're in a different situation. We'll make it this case scenario. Boss puts a lot of pressure on you to get the information. And the person doesn't want to give the information. Why don't they want to give the information? It's forbidden. Information is forbidden. It's Lashon Hara. So now the boss comes back and the boss says, okay, if you don't give this information, you're not coming back. I'll give you your walking papers right now. What's the halacha? The halacha is you have to give up your job. You lost your job. Now you're going to say, really? Is that how far it goes? That's how far it goes. Now, what's the philosophical outlook over here? I'm not allowed to transgress the Torah even if it costs me my job. Now, a person can be distraught. A person can be angry. A person can, be depressed. How are you going to make any money? What's going to be? Got bills to pay, this, that. But you have to remember one thing. And I'm not going to say we forget this, but I think we do. Because we're so busy on a daily basis chasing our tails. We're so busy running around, we forget there's God who runs the world. You can say, how can I forget that? It's very easy to forget. Why is it very easy to forget? Because we're so busy putting our best foot forward, we forget the X factor. Okay, I got to try this, I got to try that. All kinds of things. All kinds of things the person's going to try and do, make things better, work harder. But you have to remember, even with all the effort we put in, a person could still come up with a goose egg. You're going to say, how can that be? I did better marketing, better customer service, better this, better that. All intents and purposes, things should change. You're right. But you're forgetting the X factor. The X factor is either God will bless it or he won't. And if he does, it doesn't matter what you do. Which is ironic. Because this is certainly not the way the world thinks. Not in any way, shape, or form. The world thinks, okay, you put in your best, you put your best foot forward, you work hard, the dividends will come. It'll come. Unless, you're in a field that just doesn't make a lot of money. Right? The salary is not very good. Right? So that could also be. Right? But if someone's doing something where, other people doing the same thing or similar things and they're doing okay, you should also be doing okay. Same marketing, same product, same this. So you can say, well, maybe it's about the advertising, maybe it's about location, maybe, I don't know, come up with 20 different things. 20 different things why things aren't going right. Some of them could be correct. Right? Maybe I have to do this a little bit better, drop the price a little bit, whatever. A lot of things, the person can be innovative. Try and make things work. But you know what? The person can do 10 different things. And at the end of the day, it just doesn't go. And then you ask your question, why didn't it go? I tried this, I tried that. So the bottom line is the effort I put in is not commensurate with what comes out, which goes against everything in the secular world. The harder you work, dividends, it'll pay off. Not necessarily. Doesn't necessarily work that way. And there's no guarantee. Secular world will swear by it. If you work hard, you'll make money. But there's an X factor. And the X factor is there's a Ribono Shel Olam, there's a God who runs the world. And he's the one in charge. But the problem is we get so caught up in, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to do other things. And in the end, he's the one calling the shots. It's not dependent on me. The person can say, well, maybe I should do nothing. I'll just sit back and do nothing. Well, that's not a good scenario either. Right? We do have an obligation. Says the Chovos Levavos to put our best foot forward. We have to put our best foot forward. Can't just say, well, God's going to provide. And that's it. Yeah, unless someone's on that level where they rely on God for everything. And they put in minimal effort. Not too many people in this generation holding that way. So therefore, we got to put on our best foot forward. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. Depends. Right? But if a person sees, they're putting their best foot forward, they're doing what they need to do, they have to remember. And if God says no, it doesn't matter what you do. So you got to try and, get rid of that block. Where if things aren't going well, the mantra when we pray is, God, you're the one in charge. Right? That's always the mantra. You're the one in charge. I'm putting my best foot forward. You're the one who's either going to bless it or not. That's the mantra. But you'll say, yeah, it's a little dodgy. When we're being squeezed, at the bottom of a toothpaste, you're being squeezed over here. And it could go on for a while, it could stop, it could get better, it could get worse, God forbid. Or a person's going to be making enough money, but other things happen. Fridge goes, car goes, other things. And many things could happen. And what's the bottom line? We're not in charge. Now, we can't be reckless. We got to do the best to our ability, guard things and whatever. But, we have to realize that it's not in our hands. Essentially, it's not in our hands. Now, if this is what's meant to be, it's either speak Lashon Hara or lose your job. Chofetz Chaim states clear. I have to lose my job. I have to give up my job over here. So what's going to be? Person will be in panic mode. What's going to be? If you stick up for Torah, you never lose. Right? A person keeps Shabbos, they don't lose. And people say, how can I keep Shabbos? I need to stay open, competitors, this, that. So if God can provide that you work, 6 days a week and you take off one day, God can give you the livelihood in 6 days as he could in 7. He doesn't need me to say that, but that should be obvious. Right? If God's going to provide whatever you're going to make, you make what you do, whether you work an extra day or you don't. Because even if you work that extra day, that money's no good. That money on Shabbos got to burn. Can't get benefit from it. So even a person thinks they're going to make more that way, they'll lose other ways. And it'll offset. We don't necessarily see it necessarily. A person will say, hey, I made $80,000, $90,000. Let's say, after taxes, take home 70, 65, 70, whatever it is. But then a person has to realize that's not how much you made. Right? That's not what I'm giving, Meiser on. That's what I'm giving charity on. Why not? Because you have to realize there were things that you lost money. Not talking about investments. You had to, your dental work. Car things. Things in the house. You had to fix up. Those are losses. Some more, some less. Right? But if a person wants to know from Rosh Hashanah, there's a decree, how much a person is going to make. And normally we would say that amount of money they're going to pay Meiser, they're going to give charity on, is 10% after taxes. But the reality is the amount of money you really made is money you also lost. Money that went to the dentist, doctor bills, car, fridge, whatever. So if you would take into account all these different things, I'm not talking about normal things, clothing, food, those are also expenses. Right? But we're talking things that you don't necessarily expect. Expenses you don't necessarily expect. So once you take those off, that's how much you were supposed to get. Because even if a person, they work hard, they work extra hours, overtime, whatever, and then they think, I made this amount of money, after taxes. But the reality is you didn't. The reality is that, that's what you made, but according to, in God's mind, the amount you made is less than that because of all these other bills. Wear and tear of all these different things. So, so when it comes to that, a person has to realize where everything comes from. And it's very easy. Certainly we're in the, generation before the Messiah comes. We're in the Messianic eras, no question. So one of the major trials of this generation is that things seem to, it looks like we're living in a godless world. It looks like things are absolutely haywire. Because they're haywire, then, it looks pretty bad. And we can't very hard to make heads or tails out of anything. Doesn't mean there's not a divine plan. We're just not privy to that. But even so, when we see what goes on, and it's just utter chaos. That's what it is. Things seem to get worse day by day. All kinds of different things. Tragedies, murders, people have financial issues, sickness. It's all over. So God has an ultimate plan. But the trial, one of the main trials of this generation is seeing God's hiddenness within hiddenness. What do I mean seeing? Is that we understand what we see we don't understand. Right? We've spoken about this a lot. We don't understand anything. I mentioned on Sunday, a class on the book of Leviticus, that we spoke about what happens with the soul and the soul going up when the soul sleeps and connection between different parts of the soul. There are a lot of things we don't fathom at all. God can say after 120 years, I saved your life so many times, let me show you. I helped you so many times, let me show you. Not showing us in this world per se. Because this world is disguised in Teva, in nature. That's what this world is. It's like nature going about its work. It's just that sometimes people have bad days and they're at the wrong place, quote unquote, at the wrong time. So we don't see God's handiwork here. Sometimes God throws us a bone, shows us something pretty clear. Right? But a lot of times it's hidden within hiddenness. It's hard to live that way. It's hard to say, going through all these things and, it's just hard. So after 120 years, God's going to show us all the miracles he did for us. And he did for the world. Here in Israel, it's a little bit easier. Sometimes we'll hear in the news, weeks later, all the things that the army did to stop infiltrations, and terrorist attacks and blah, blah, blah. But you don't find it out until after the fact. Find out like a week later, 2 weeks later. They stopped this, they stopped that. So, it's just an interesting thing. Because at the time, wow, this is such a miracle. This, look what they did over here. But, we take God out of the picture. When you find out after the fact, that's somewhat similar to what will happen later. And God's going to show us the bigger picture. And God's going to show us all the things he did. Now, we don't see it. Person might have, supposed to get hit by a truck crossing the street. It didn't happen. Truck was able to stop, and nothing happened. You didn't even see anything happen. We're not talking about a close call. Many things thwarted and not done because God didn't want it to happen. Other things, God didn't stop. Okay. But there's a bigger picture. A bigger picture we're not privy to. Imagine, and this would be a real scary thought. Imagine for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Not going to go more than that. Imagine for 10 minutes, God opened our eyes. And God allowed us to see what he sees. What's the first thing we'll see? If he opens our eyes enough, we'll see all these microbes wanting to enter our bodies. Cause all kinds of sickness, other things we don't see. The naked eye can't see. Right? That we're not going to, imagine if we saw that. Kind of terrifying. But imagine in God's world what he sees and how he runs things. I think we'd be absolutely shocked out of our good. He did it for 5 minutes. We could ask a million questions. I'll give an example. Somebody comes to synagogue on Shabbos. And the one in the Gabbai, the synagogue is calling different people up to the Torah. And the person sitting there doesn't understand. I'm going to call this important person up. I didn't call that person up. You didn't call the other person up. So he goes up to the Gabbai after services and he says, I don't understand. When the rabbi get in the Aliyah, when he get called up, when this one get called up. So the Gabbai says, you're a guest here. The rabbi, had something last week. So we gave him an Aliyah last week. Called him to the Torah last week. This person got something last week, or this person was called up because he had yortzeit. Someone in his family died, commemorating, whatever. This person got called up for a different reason. So the Gabbai is telling him, you don't know what goes on over here. You're not privy to inside information. Now, who's got that inside information? The Gabbai says, me. I know what goes on here week in and week out. I know who's been called to the Torah who hasn't. So by you coming, once in a blue moon, and now you see what goes on, you have a million questions. But the problem is you weren't there before. You don't see the inside, you're not in the inside track. So by not being the inside track, not being privy to that information, you have no idea what goes on. So the Gabbai says, he probably says a nicer way than I would. He would say, you don't got a clue. You don't have a clue. Keep your mouth shut. You don't know what you're watching. You don't know what you see. You can't make heads or tails of it because you don't know what's going on. Now, couldn't God say that to us? If I were to put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, and I was playing gods, and I'm controlling all these things like the Matrix, and then I hear, somebody prays, God goes to this difficulty, and this is hard. God's like, yeah, I know. But you don't know why. You don't have a clue. And you say, and the person says, it's not really fair. I'm working hard. I'm trying, whatever. But you don't understand. Right? If I was playing God saying you're missing 8 different factors going on here. 10 different factors you're not privy to. And how all this works. Because it sounds like the Matrix. Exactly how all that works. So then people will say, oh, but this isn't fair and that's not fair. Well, let's see. Moshe Rabbeinu, give another example. Medrash says, when the Jews are in Egypt, Moshe Rabbeinu sees a child being, a baby, being smeared into mortar, part of a brick wall. Moshe Rabbeinu says, this isn't fair. Why does the child have to suffer like that? I want to stop it. God's like, no, don't. It's a bad idea. But he says the child's suffering. God's okay, go ahead. Go ahead, save the child. Moshe Rabbeinu saves the child. Right? Who's that child become? One of the evil kings of the Jewish people. Right? I think that's how the Medrash goes. Right? It was someone who was evil. God was going to nip it in the bud. But Moshe Rabbeinu said, no. I know better. This looks really bad. So wouldn't we all agree if we saw that happening? We would say, it's cruel. Don't do it. But what if that baby was Hitler Yamach Shemoy V'Zichra? So God's doing a chesed. He's knocking this child out. That's going to cause destruction later. Oh, but that's cruel. You can't do that. You know, what did that baby ever do to deserve that punishment? But if he knew who this baby was and what he's going to do in the future, don't you think it's a fitting end for such a child? So that would be justified. We don't have those glasses. We don't even have those 3D glasses. Can't see. We're blind. We're 100% blind over here. Does that mean we don't go through difficulty? No. Does that mean we don't suffer? No. What it means is we don't understand anything. They're going to say, what? I have to be a masochist over here? Say, God, give me more. Give me more. No, we're not on that level. 100% not on that level. And no one should think that they are. The only question is how we deal with it. A student comes to my Rebbe's Rebbe, Moshe Schneider, blessed memory. And he says, Rebbe, I want a blessing. So Moshe Schneider asks him, what blessing do you want? He says, what blessing do you want? And he says, I want the blessing. Everything should be easy. So says Moshe Schneider. Moshe Schneider says I can't give such a blessing. So that's a blessing in vain. He said, I'll give you a blessing that whatever trials and tribulations you have, you're able to overcome. But we very easily complain, and we probably have a lot to complain about, considering we're living in a tissue generation, right? Or a Teflon generation. Got a lot to complain about. But we may be justified. Well, at the end of the day is how we live our lives. It's how we move on, which is not an easy thing. You know, definitely not an easy thing. But as we mentioned earlier, there are things we may have to do that may have tremendous self-sacrifice. Tremendous self-sacrifice. And why do we have to do it? Could be for any number of reasons. You know, a person got this job for so long, you know, doing very well, and then this thing happens. The thing happens where they have to snitch on someone else. And then they get the ultimatum. If you don't snitch, you don't speak Lashon Hara over here, you lose your job. The person can ask, how's that fair? Been working there for so long. You know, how can that be? And what's the answer? Because the Torah comes first. And even if doors are closed, other doors get open. Seeing this with my own eyes. Number of times. You think this thing is the worst thing in the world, and at the time it looks pretty bad. Right? Then what happens? Other doors open. Now, could take time, could take longer time, whatever. But just because the door gets slammed doesn't mean another door doesn't get open. You say, but I can only see that in hindsight. Sometimes it's not just in hindsight. You know, sometimes what does God do over here? God says, okay, I don't want you doing this anymore. I want you to focus on any things. I'm going to nip in the bud right now. We're going to say, now what? What am I supposed to do? You know, person gets saved one way, and then a year later, 2 years later, they get chucked out, right? Let's say that, they got a job, almost out of nowhere. And then the company 2 years later decides to downsize, right? A year later, whatever, call it COVID, whatever it is. The person's thinking, I don't understand. I got saved. Things are going okay. What happened over here? Why should this have happened? You say, I don't know. You're bad luck. Company decides to downsize. COVID hits, whatever it is. But then let's say, you don't know what to do. You collect unemployment, checking this, checking that. And 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, something else comes up. Whereby the income that was lost is not only you're getting that income, you're getting plus. So now you say, okay, now I get it. Okay, I lost this, but now I'm doing other things that I really want to do, and it's making more money than I was before. But we don't look at it that way at the beginning. See, that's going to be in the future. Where even something looks bad, we're going to make the blessing. It's good. Very hard to do that now. It's impossible to do that now. But sometimes God will throw us a proverbial bone. And God will say, okay, I'm going to make it hard over here, but don't worry. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm still here. You're going to say, but what are you doing over here? I understand you're holding my hand, but, I just fell in a manhole. He said, okay, but I'm going to pull you out of the manhole. I'm going to pull you out, no scratches. A little bit of aggravation, but no scratches. You're going to say, really? I want to see. Like, wouldn't we want to see that straight away? Of course. So let's say 2 weeks later, a month later, right? A month later, something happens, all of a sudden, you get a better job. Or similar fields, you're making more money. I would say that's God's irony. So why did I lose the job in the first place? Who knows? God says I got better potential for you over here. But I have to make things work like this in order you get there. Because you won't get there otherwise. But what's the first thing a person's going to do? They're going to panic. Why did this happen? What's going to be? The unknown. A lot of things that we're thinking going through our minds. And then all of a sudden, bam, 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 other things happen. And you're like, I'm so glad I don't have that job anymore. This is so much better. Better hours, better benefits, better money. Now, someone's going to ask me, Rabbi, does it always happen that way? We don't always see it that way. But if we look in hindsight, sometimes we're going to see, okay, this happens, and then something else happened, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a question of how long it takes the light to be lit. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like I said, I can say more times than not. Seeing certain things happen, and you're like, okay, this is what you want. You're the one in charge. Let's see. And then other things happen over a short period of time. You're like, great. Okay, this is much better. But I wouldn't have planned that. I wouldn't have thought, whatever. I wouldn't have thought about it in that sense. Why it happened that way. But the end result, ended up positive. So a person could ask, but what if it doesn't end up so positive? And what if a person struggles this, that? Okay, it can happen also. There is a plan. That's the point. There is a plan. We're just not, all, privy to it. Nachamish Gamzu, the Rebbe Akiva, is greater than Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva said, Kol David Rahmanu L'Toivav. Everything that God does is for the good. What did Nachamish Gamzu say? He said, Gamzu L'Tov. He said, everything is good. That's different. Nachamish Gamzu lived in a hovel, paraplegic with boils all over his body. He said everything is good. Right? It's all mentality here. Right? I'm not saying the person doesn't suffer and goes through a hard time, and all that. Right? But, a person has to say, okay, this is not meant to be. Not meant to be. This is not what you should be doing. For whatever reason. But it's hard. It's hard to live that mentality. But if a person says, on a regular basis, and they pray and they say, God, you're the one in charge. I'm going to put my best foot forward. I'm stuck over here. I'm not going to rely on man over here. I'll put my best foot forward, but you're the one in charge. So that's why when it comes to work and other things, you want to be around like-minded people. So we're not saying that the answer is, if someone says, is it a sin for Noahides to work with Muslims, Christians, atheists, other religions to make money? God forbid it. Right? We don't really have a choice in many cases. So if that's the case, the people around you, you're not going to have the greatest conversations. You'll be friendly, to a certain extent, but not too friendly. Because you always want to be around like-minded people. Because if you're not around like-minded people, what happens? They bring you down. They'll say, some people could say, oh, you're a God-fearing person. Look what's going on in your life. Look at all the difficulty. People could say that. Or how do you explain this? Like, you don't want conversations like that. I'm not saying you have to duck the conversation. People have questions, fine. But you're hanging around with the wrong people, you got to be careful. Right? In this case, people work with others. You don't know who you're working with. You don't really have a choice. Person can work for, with Orthodox Jews, and some of them may not be on the up and up either. They may also have issues. Right? So it's a tremendous blessing, to be able to work with people that think the way you do. You have to be careful. Because my Rebbe would say that even a small conversation, a quick conversation with someone who's an atheist has a negative effect. Totally has a negative effect. So you can say, what, I should never speak to people? Minimize it. Who knows what they're going to say? Cursing, other things. What do you need it for? Again, I'm not saying you ignore them outright. That's really not good. Wouldn't be a team player. Right? But you have to limit the interaction. Right? And if the interaction is limited, then they won't have an influence. And they shouldn't have an influence. But in general, we just got to be careful who we speak to, who we hang out with. Because even people with the best intentions, even if they're Orthodox Jews, doesn't necessarily mean we should be hanging around with them. So you're going to say, what, you're disparaging Orthodox Jews? No. That would be Lashon Hara. Right? What we're saying is you got to be careful. I'm not going to say you have to be snobby. Wouldn't go that far. You got to be careful. Not everyone has the best values. Even in the Orthodox world. They just don't. In many different ways. So, yeah, being part of a community is a big thing. There's no question. But the only way you find this out, and I can speak about it for days, but the only way a person will find that out is by living in a community. Once the person lives in a community, as my Rebbe would say, you live in a Jewish community, you still want to be Jewish, you see how Jews act, then either you're the real deal or a little bit wacko. Why? Because you'll say, what? I changed my life over here to be with these people that, some of them steal, some of them do other things. So people will say, don't mix up Jews and Judaism. And just because someone dresses a certain way, you say, wow, aren't they Orthodox? Who says? Right? Depends how they act. A girl walks into a, ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, not exactly dressed the way they should be. Right? And some people throw acid in her face. Orthodox Jews. That mean they're really Orthodox? No. Did the Rebbe hold of such a thing? No. So why they do it? They got angry. Isn't it forbidden? 100%. You gotta be careful not to mix up what people do and what Judaism really is. That's for sure. But people could say, this is what I gave up, being a non-Jew for. I used to sit with my Rebbe once a week. in his rabbinical court, got to see what went on. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, you always told me it's a good thing you have a connection to me. Otherwise, you see what goes on here. You're going to wonder why I became religious. People lie, steal, cheat, other things. These people, big hats, long coats, no embarrassment. So they're going to say, how can people do such a thing? So those questions I don't answer. Why are people overweight? Why do they smoke? People do all kinds of things wrong. They have an evil inclination. Bigger the person, the bigger evil inclination. Because the Torah tells him, Torah says that you're not allowed to take a bribe. Who's it talking about? Rabbinic court judges. Kind of ironic. They're supposed to be in a high level, high spiritual level, not to mention all the Torah they know. So if everybody else, I can understand why you shouldn't take a bribe. Person in the position of influence, whatever. But a rabbinical court judge, why you say it about them? They also have an evil inclination, even a bigger evil inclination. The greater spiritually a person is, the greater the evil inclination. Now, does that mean all rabbinic court judges are on the take? No. Could some of them be? Yeah. What happened to integrity? Spoken about that. What happened to integrity? How could it be? There has to be integrity, especially by a rabbinic court judge. Because then, the law that he gives over is skewed, totally skewed. Right, so the halacha, what happens? A rabbinic court judge has to know who they're sitting with. Who the other rabbis are. And let's say he knows one of the rabbis is a thief. You're going to say, how can he be a thief? And sit there. Maybe it's not well known, whatever. But you have to know who you're sitting with. Got to be integrity. Can't just sit with whoever you want. I mean, whatever. It's a law in Shulchan Aruch. If he's transgressed certain things, you're not allowed to sit with him. As a rabbinic court judge. The question is, why would I think I could? Right, it's a bigger question. Right, but in general, we can get skewed. Our thoughts can get skewed over here. So certainly in the business fields, no question, it's one of the ways Talmud says test a person. By the way, he acts in business. If he's honest in business. So people of other groups, other faiths, quote unquote, or atheists, gotta be careful. We absolutely have to be careful. Because what they say is bad. Not everything they say. But they can say things that make us think. Maybe weaken our faith, so to speak. That's why my Rebbe says you have minimal conversation. Minimal. Because you don't want someone like that getting in your head. And then it brings down the levels of modesty, other things. But again, there's a balance. There has to be a balance. Working in such a place. And a person doesn't have that balance and they go bend over backwards to be, part of the team and all that, they're going to get burnt. At some point, they're going to get burnt. And that's going to be traumatic. And that shouldn't happen. And the reason it happens is because barriers get broken down. Right? And that should never be. If the person's going in this path, that's who they are. That's who they are on the outside. That's who they are on the inside. That doesn't change. Doesn't change at all. But you don't want to be put in situations where, different levels of things have to be compromised. I want to try and nip that in the bud. But it's whatever. It's not a simple thing. I'm just giving general guidelines, but it's definitely not a simple thing. But it's something we have to be careful of, right? Someone, quote unquote, in the real world, you got to be careful. Because we may not be the greatest scholars in the world, and someone says something, throws us for a loop. It can happen. Right? That's why, in this generation, that's the thing we have to work on the most. Believe in faith in God, no question. But again, it's not like the Christians where it's just faith without knowledge. Right? Here we're talking faith with knowledge. So we have to get the knowledge. Right? 100% we have to get knowledge. And we have to understand. Someone points out as well, right? You got to be careful also looking at them. It's true. The famous story of Shmuel Diskin. He had to go to court for something, and he absolutely refused to look at the judge. And his lawyer, kept telling him this is what you have to do. You can't just ignore them and talk or whatever. And he didn't want to look at the face of an evil person. And he ended up winning the case anyway. So even looking at evil people has an effect. Certainly can have an effect. So yeah, we got to be careful, right? No question. As someone here points out, 100%, looking at people can also have an effect. Certainly listening to them all the more so. Right? Because most things that come out of their mouth are not going to be good. Most likely. I'm not going to say every last thing they say is wrong, but you definitely have to be careful. That's for sure. There's a story with Rabbi Cheskel Levenstein, of blessed memory, the former spiritual mentor of the Mir Yeshiva in Panovich. And when he lived in Mir, he lived a few blocks from the yeshiva. But he used to walk all the way around the town in order to get there. Why? Because right near the yeshiva happened to be a church. And he didn't want to walk within a certain distance of the church. Even walking by, he didn't want to do. So there will be people that go to great lengths, not to see certain things, not to hear certain things, etc. And that's good because, as we mentioned many times, what we hear, what we see becomes part of our soul. And that's very hard to, you get a word very, very hard to get rid of it. But fortunately, it's there. It sticks like glue, right? In many ways. And it definitely has a negative effect. I don't think there's any question. So, some people may say, well, you can't look at this, you can't hear that. Sounds like fanaticism 101 or 101A, right? But we have to remember that the Torah says when it comes to idolatry, and impurity. So the language it's like devik, it's like glue, sticks to us like glue to our soul. That's what it does. So you're gonna say, I gotta be careful of this, you gotta be careful of that. You can't even think certain things. It has an effect. It has an effect. It's not like the evil inclination comes along and says, I want you to desecrate Shabbos. You're not gonna do that. Most of us hopefully are not gonna do that. But the evil inclination, all it needs to do is furrow in a little hole. And once it makes a little hole, then it's only a matter of time before that hole gets bigger, God forbid. So we think, yeah, okay, doing this, not so bad. Not so bad, so what's the big deal? Because of what it leads to. And it snowballs. That's the problem. And it has an effect. Right? A person will say, I can nip in the bud, I can stop this, that. It depends. First of all, it depends what it started with, and it depends where it goes. I've seen it many, many times, where maybe something innocent or maybe not so innocent, and they got worse. Then it just snowball one thing after another. It's like once a person feeds a certain desire, it's not like the desire ever goes away. It keeps banging, until you do more and more and more. And then, becomes almost impossible to stop. Right? That's why these things have to be nipped in the bud, because if you don't work hard against it, I'm not going to say impossible, but it makes it very, very hard to fight against. Whatever that is. If we're focusing on doing the right thing, that's going to lead to other mitzvahs. Focus on the wrong thing, lead to other transgressions. That's what it does. Snowball. I'd like to say you can straddle both worlds and it works, but I've definitely seen from personal experience it doesn't. Right? You just go one way or the other. You really go the wrong side more than the right side. That's really what happens. I'm not going to say that, God forbid a person can't get out of it, but the more a person feeds on it, the worse it is. Right? That's for sure. The worse it is, and it just keeps going. Yeah, I guess that's what I have to say about that. I don't have any other questions. All right, there are no other questions, and I'm going to stop there. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, you can find me Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or you can find me at Michael Chaim Kaufman on Facebook. Send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, ChaimKoffman @gmail.com.